If you have a strange or scary story you'd like to share with the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. Hey Raven, love your channel, and thanks for helping me sleep at night. I have a weird glitch/creepy story. I was in high school, and every weekend I would spend at my then girlfriend's house. I spent so much time at their house that her mom would jokingly refer to me as her other son. Her mom was divorced and very independent. She was always running around working in her yard, cutting the grass, trimming the bushes, cutting down large tree branches, etc. Me being a tall guy, I used to help her around the house occasionally since my girlfriend's younger brother didn't want to help much. I will refer to her younger brother as Brandon. I felt obligated to help since I was always there and eating their food. It was the least I could do. One Saturday night, I was at my girlfriend's house and her mom came home with an excited look on her face. She was happy to see me there and asked if I wouldn't mind riding with her down the road to gather some big white rocks she saw piled up on the side of a dirt road. Her mom wanted to use the rocks to decorate a corner area in their backyard. Of course, I wouldn't say no, and I hopped to help her. Her mom then yelled for Brandon, who was upstairs, sealed away in his room, to come and help us. My girlfriend would stay home since her mom didn't want to have all of us tag along. We hopped in the mom's SUV. I sat in the front passenger seat and Brandon crawled in the back. Her mom put down all the seats in the back and laid a tarp over everything. We took off down the road, and the construction site was about 15 minutes away. It was late at night, midnight to be exact, and the mom was telling me and Brandon along the way that we should be careful not to get caught, which was funny because we were just taking rocks. The neighborhood was empty and dark, and looked like a tornado had torn through. The streets were covered in dirt from all the construction. The only thing standing was a few houses in the distance. It was dead silent as we parked the car on the dirt road, the only light being the headlights shining on the pile of big, chalky white rocks, and a few dimly lit streetlights in the far distance. We hopped out and started hauling the rocks into the back of the SUV. We loaded up a decent amount of rocks and made some jokes as we all hopped back in. I quickly jumped in the passenger seat, and we sped off. Once in the car, we all laughed and joked about the police chasing us down for stealing rocks from a neighborhood. My girlfriend's brother, Brandon, let out a loud laugh from the back seat as he seemed pretty hyped. We all had a clean getaway. The ride home was quick compared to the journey there. As we pulled into the driveway, the garage door slowly opened as my girlfriend stood there with a smile on her face. She quickly investigated the back seat to look at the rocks that we had taken. As she opened the back door, she says, "Hey, where's Brandon?" Her mom and I looked at each other and laughed and said, "He's in the back." My girlfriend, confused, then said, "No, seriously, where is he? Did he go in the house at the front door?" Me and her mom turned around very confused, and sure enough, in the back seat, it was just the chalky, white rocks. We all stared in disbelief at this pile of rocks. Her mom then said, "What the hell? Where did he go?" My girlfriend was convinced that we were playing some kind of prank on her. We all just looked at each other waiting for one of us to confess to playing the prank. We stayed in silence for about a minute, and then her mom's cell phone rings. It was an unknown number. She then looks at us in confusion and picks up the phone. She says, "Hello?" And we could faintly hear Brandon on the phone saying, "Mom, can you come and get me?" Her mom and I had chills running down our spines. We were so confused. Her mom then asks where he was, and he replied, "I'm at the construction site. Why did you guys leave me?" Her mom quickly hopped back into the car, heading back to the construction site, confused. I stayed back at the house with my girlfriend and explained the whole situation to her. The creepy thing is, me and her mom were carrying on a conversation with Brandon the whole ride back. I remember hearing his distinct laugh. It was a funny squeal-like sound that he would burst out with when excited. I heard that laugh from the back seat. My girlfriend's mom heard it too. So then, the question remains, who did we have a conversation with? Who did we hear laughing from the back seat? I ran things through my mind over and over, thinking that we made up the conversation with Brandon in our heads, possibly. But how did we both hear it? It turns out, we did leave Brandon by accident on that dark dirt road, unknowingly. Him being just as confused as us, having to walk to the nearest house and knock on the door at 1 a.m. in the morning asking to use the phone. The family then opened the door for Brandon and then called the cops. Rightfully so, since some teenager was knocking on their door claiming his mom left him in the middle of the night. The mom had ended up putting the rocks back and tried to explain to the police that it was an accident leaving her kid behind. I, to this day, have no idea who we were talking to that night. I remember Brandon boasting and laughing about how we had a smooth getaway. Well, it turned out to be a not so smooth getaway. Hi, Raven. I would like to start by saying that I absolutely adore your channel. I've been listening for about 3 weeks now, and I've been binge watching mainly the glitch content, which I think is relevant to the story. But anyway, my glitch happened literally today, just a few minutes ago at the time of me writing this. For some context, I'm a 21-year-old female, and I live alone with my dog, Brooke, my 9-month-old Labrador. I was sat on my bed on FaceTime with my boyfriend. We're long distance right now. We met while I was on a trip in the US, but I'm from the UK. Not super relevant, but I thought I would clarify. My boyfriend and I were talking about some deep things. It was a personal conversation, and due to this, I was hitting my vape, as he was. I was talking to him about some stuff from my childhood, painful stuff that I find it difficult to talk about, and after I finished and he began talking, I looked around my bedroom, which was dimly lit with just my fairy lights on, and my dog was asleep in her bed. I realized that my bedroom door was still open, and the hallway light was off. Which, for context, I'm not afraid to admit that I'm terrified of the dark. And I'm not someone who can sleep or relax in a dark room with a door still open. And so I stood up from my bed and went to close my bedroom door, my phone still in my hand, and my boyfriend with me still on FaceTime. I shut my door feeling less uneasy and go to sit back on my bed, continuing to talk to my boyfriend. As we spoke, I reached down to grab my vape that I'm almost 99.9% positive I'd been hitting this whole time, and it wasn't there. So I reached to the other side, and again, not there. So a bit more confused now, I say out loud, "Where the heck did my vape go?" My boyfriend suggested that I look down the side of the bed and on the windowsill, etc., so I did. But again, it was not there. I got up, opened my bedroom door, and turned on the landing light, quickly checking around and still not seeing it. I returned to my room and start ripping my sheets off of my bed and looking under the pillows. Nothing. Hell, I even checked Brooke, my dog, her bed. It wasn't there. At this point, I felt absolutely crazy. I told my boyfriend so, and we began talking about how weird it was, and he was affirming that, yes, I had been vaping, and he doesn't understand where it's gone. I hadn't left my room, and he saw that for himself. Defeated, I closed my door and just said out loud to my boyfriend, "Damn, the Matrix got me," and we laughed. But then I was like, oh, crap, No, I think the Matrix actually did just get me. This was on the forefront of my mind because, weirdly, as I mentioned earlier, I had literally just been listening to Glitch in the Matrix stories earlier while I walked Brooke. I always listen to some sort of podcast or channel while I'm out, and that day was no different. So I said out loud again, "Matrix, do you know how rude it is to steal somebody's vape?" And me and my boyfriend laughed, and I turned to Brooke, who was probably confused as to why I was tearing the room apart, and then said, "Damn, Brooke, were you asleep on the job?" Referring to her non-literal guarding duties, and I sat down. Brooke jumped up with excitement, as dogs do whenever you use a silly tone, so I went to turn the bedroom light off and returned to my bed, when my boyfriend said, "I guess you gotta go check downstairs." I looked at him like he was crazy. I said sheepishly, "I'm not going down there, it's dark." And I laughed nervously, and he said, "Oh, right." I followed up with, "And also, I haven't left this room. I was just vaping. I don't see how it could possibly be downstairs." My boyfriend, in agreement, said, "Yeah, it 1000% would be weird as hell if you go downstairs and it's there. We both know you haven't been down there." I laughed and said, "It would be weird. It won't be there, but you know what? I guess I can check," deciding I could risk the dark for a few seconds to find my vape. So anyway, I open the door and Brooke runs out ahead of me. I turn on the landing light and go downstairs, turning the light on down there too. My boyfriend is still on FaceTime. I turn the corner and what do I see right in front of my microwave? My vape. I was literally shocked, and my boyfriend said, "No way." I said nothing, still in shock as I nodded and showed the vape to my boyfriend. We both high-key freak out at this point, and I run upstairs as I'm like, "Nope." This really unsettled me and made me feel so uncomfortable. I have never had an experience like this before, and before this moment, I wasn't sure if I believed in the Matrix. But now, I'm absolutely positive that we're in a Matrix, and so is my boyfriend, and before we were both on the more skeptical side. I shouted, "Thank you, Matrix," thoroughly freaked out. I really don't know what to make of this situation. I've been sat here talking to my boyfriend and discussing the situation. The Matrix really did say, "Bet, watch this," and scared me at 1:30 in the morning. Hello, Raven. I've been a listener of your channel for a while now, and I really enjoy the stories here. I was actually listening to some older videos when I was reminded of a strange thing that happened to me a few years ago that may or may not have been a glitch. I was around 19 at the time. This happened in 2021, and I was in my first year at my current job. My work schedule isn't very consistent, it just depends on the week. This particular day, I was scheduled for the morning shift, and I had to be at work at 8 a.m. As I don't have a car of my own yet, my dad was the one driving me to work that morning. In the mornings, I typically wake up at least an hour before I have to be at work. So, 7 a.m., I get ready fairly quickly, between 10 and 15 minutes. Then I go back to my room and lay down on my bed and scroll social media or YouTube until I leave the house 20 minutes before my shift begins. It takes roughly 15 minutes to get to my job depending on the traffic. I am very rarely late, usually clocking in right on time. And now, as they say, the glitch. This particular morning, I woke up at 7 and did my usual routine to get ready for work. And after getting dressed, I go back to my room to look at my phone. My dad was also awake by this time, and was on his phone in the living room. I was still feeling tired, so I decided to catch some extra rest instead of looking at my phone, so I closed my eyes. When I opened my eyes again, I did not check the time. but I knew it was time to leave the house. So I grabbed my things and went to go tell my dad that it was time to go. We head out and eventually gets to my job around the normal amount of drive time. I tell him bye and head inside to clock in for the day. Everyone greets me as usual. I clock in and I start my tasks for the morning. I work in a restaurant and my morning tasks usually involve prepping food. I'd been there at the most around 30 minutes when I finally glance over at the clock. It read a few minutes before 10 a.m. I think to myself, wait, that can't be right. My shift started at 8, and I hadn't been at work for that long. How could it already have been 10? I checked the clock on the work computer just in case the analog clock on the wall was incorrect, and it read the same time, a few minutes before 10. At this point, I'm baffled. How did I lose almost 2 hours like that? My most rational thought was that, in that moment I had closed my eyes to rest before leaving the house, I ended up sleeping for much longer than I intended, and arrived at work late. But that wouldn't make sense. My dad knew I had to be in at 8. If I had fallen asleep, he would have come to check on me after having not left my room at my usual time to leave with him. And even if he didn't, my coworkers would have called me after a certain amount of time passed after my shift began to ask where I was. I'm a very punctual person when it comes to work, and if I'm more than 5 minutes late without notice, my coworkers immediately call to check on me. So it seems as if I just happened to lose 2 hours out of nowhere. I've had a few other minor glitches happen to me, things seemingly disappearing and reappearing in their usual spots. One glitch I believe I experienced with my grandmother, but I might save that one for another entry one day. In a trip to the UK in 2011, my husband and my cousin and I got in on a pub quiz in York. We weren't really interested at first, so we didn't take any answer sheets, but to pass the time, I went ahead and started writing down the answers on my own sheet of paper. I started with number 1, so we didn't miss any. Around number 15, I believe, I heard the lady that was calling out the questions skip to 17, or something. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know that she skipped at least 2. As my husband was ordering at the bar, I looked to my cousin for confirmation that I had heard correctly, and he agreed that she had skipped a couple of numbers. I expected some participant in the quiz to correct her or ask her about it, but nobody said anything. The lady went on calling out questions. She continued in order to number 25, and then suddenly she skipped to 29. This anomaly was confirmed by both my husband and cousin. And again, nobody corrected the lady or asked about the skipped numbers. I could only assume that 1, the quiz worked in some odd way that we weren't familiar with, that the locals were, or 2, somebody would point out the mistake before the lady called out the answers. Maybe ask what the number to those questions were. However, that never happened. The questions stopped at 30, and then the lady began calling out the answers. I waited curiously for her to get to the numbers that she had skipped. I was positive that when she called out those numbers, somebody in the pub would protest and say she had never given the questions. Instead, when she did get to those numbers, 16, 19, 26 through 28, I remembered those questions being called out. By the end of the answers, I realized that every answer she had called out had been to a question that I had, in fact, heard her ask. What's more, my husband and cousin remembered all the questions too. We couldn't figure it out. We never did figure it out. There appeared to be no confusion in the pub whatsoever. Unfortunately, we didn't think to ask anyone else in the pub if they had observed the same thing we did, and I wish so much that we had. I will add that none of us were drunk or even buzzed. We had just had one beer and had barely started on them when this was happening. Hello, Raven. I've had odd events happen throughout my life, such as thinking about someone I have not seen in a long time, and then having them turn up unexpectedly within a day or two. I've thought about songs from years ago, and suddenly they're playing on the radio. I even knew the moment that my grandfather passed away. I was sitting on the couch one evening with my 5-month-old son when I heard the siren of a fire truck rush by my house. Something soothing washed over me. It was almost like a hug. I looked at my son and softly said, "Your great-grandpop is gone." 5 minutes later, my sister called me to give the news of Pop's passing. I dreamt of my grandmother the night that she passed. I dreamed that my mom and I were looking at a family photo album. In my dream, my mom pointed to a photo of my grandmother. My grandmother was really young in the picture. It was from the 1940s, and she was so beautiful. My mom points to the picture, looks at me with such sadness, and says, "She's not with us anymore." The next morning, my mom gave me the news of my grandmother's passing. This I attribute to having a close, almost spiritual connection to the people, places, and things that I care deeply about. The last thing that has happened started out some years ago. My husband and I moved into a house that was built in the 1950s. When we purchased the house, the kitchen consisted of the standard 1950s metal cabinets, old gas stoves, and no storage to speak of. We were getting ready to go out one evening, and I was standing in the kitchen putting on my favorite earrings. They were garnets, and were a Christmas gift from my husband. They were very small due to our tight budget for Christmas gifts. Garnet is my very favorite gemstone. However, it's not my birthstone. It is, however, my dad's birthstone. To continue, I was putting on the earrings when I dropped one of the earrings on the kitchen floor. My husband and I both looked everywhere for it with no luck. Fast forward 8 or 9 years, for some reason, I just could not get rid of the single garnet earring that I had left. I thought about giving it to my brother since he had one pierced ear, but something kept telling me not to. My husband and I decided that it was time to update the kitchen, and that we had sufficient funds to do so. We completely gutted the kitchen. Walls, floors, everything came out. My dad helped with the renovation of our kitchen and was a tremendous help with his knowledge of things having to do with renovation. Fast forward another year or two, we completely loved our new kitchen, especially knowing that my dad helped with this project. He passed away in 2016. One day, not long after his passing, I came home from work early. The sun was streaming through the back kitchen window, lighting up the room with bright afternoon sunlight. As I walked into the kitchen, there on the floor was something very small and sparkling. I picked it up, and to my surprise, it was the garnet earring. Not the one that had been in my jewelry box without its mate for so many years, but the one I lost prior to us gutting the kitchen for a remodel. I stood there looking at it laying in the palm of my hand, and then realized that it was my dad's birthday. I've enjoyed wearing my tiny garnet earrings ever since, and now I can't help but think that my dad returned them to me. This story happened all the way back in March of this year, 2024, specifically at roughly 1 in the morning on the 24th. Since it happened, I've just accepted that it's a very weird thing that happened to me, but when it happened, I was both weirded out and initially terrified. And in case you read my recent comment where I brought up the haunted house I lived in until June, yes, it happened there. But before I describe what happened, I need to not only describe the dream that made it so bizarre in the first place, but also, I unfortunately am obligated to preface that understanding it requires not only tolerance, but at least a basic understanding of a misunderstood and marginalized group that I belong to. It's a double-edged sword because on one hand, it's an opportunity for me to teach people about us, but on the other hand, it makes my story seem suspiciously like a fabrication intended to do just that. Which, I would like to point out, gets significantly less suspicious when you consider that something you see frequently in your waking life would logically have a high chance of appearing in your dreams. And I had officially belonged to this community since at least October 2023. Here it goes. I am a furry. And no, that does not make me sexually interested in non-human animals. In fact, one, I'm agisexual, so I absolutely hate the thought of myself being physically involved in something sexual no matter how arousing I find someone. And two, I hate people who are involved with animals more than almost anything in the world. But even after informing you of that fact, if you don't like furries, then just skip my story. Now I can finally get back to my story. Again, this happened on the morning of March 24th, 2024, and again, my dream will be borderline necessary to understanding why this event freaked me out so much. In this dream, I had a mother and siblings, but although I can't remember what they sounded like or what their names were, I'm pretty sure they weren't my mother and siblings from real life, because we were literally all fursuiters. And considering that I already said I was, I'm sure I won't need to explain what that is. Anyways, another thing completely different from my real life is that we were all living together in a camper or trailer, just having fun in the wilderness or something like that. I also think I have vague memories of us watching Walking with Dinosaurs, because I'm pretty sure I can recall seeing that show's Ophthalmosaurus, particularly the one shot where the babies are in a cave that have perforations in the ceiling, being penetrated by sunlight. This isn't relevant, but I just wanted to bring it up for the sake of being comprehensive. And I know that, like the furry thing, it's also kind of suspicious to an outsider, because I adore that documentary, but again, it gets less suspicious when you consider that I see and think about it a lot when I'm awake. Though not as much now as I did from 2018 to 2020. But at some point, a pair of fursuiters who seemed masculine, I'm not necessarily going to call them men because they could have been something else, approached us, which my brain may have concocted because of me hearing so many scary stories of people meeting strangers in the wilderness. They specifically asked my mother for her compliance in what I believe was a business transaction, and she declined. They seemed okay with it at first, but things couldn't be further from the truth. After we had all gone to bed, this fanciful dream became a horrifyingly realistic nightmare. Those same exact two fursuiters had broken in. The next part is undoubtedly what I remember the most clearly, but ironically is the hardest part to describe. What happened next felt like, I don't know, it was as if a photograph had been downloaded by my brain, and it took over my entire vision. Like I couldn't look to the left or right, and there was nothing visible behind or to the sides of it. The photograph is still burned into my memory. It was clearly from a security camera, despite the fact that it was placed further down than what I would expect from one, and because it was taken at night when all the lights were off, everything was dark, colorless, and grainy. And the main subject of this photograph was horrifying. One of the two people from earlier were standing there after breaking in, staring straight into the camera lens. And you know what the worst part is? Their suits' heads' eyes had eye shine, exactly like a living animal. And whilst this photo was eclipsing my vision, I heard an angry masculine middle-aged voice saying, "The police keep catching these damn furries breaking into people's homes." Then I awoke. And here's finally where my story becomes worthy of being in one of your videos. When I woke up, I was facing the wall that divided my and my brother's room from what we call the back room, and the two walls of this room that faced the outdoors were almost entirely made of windows. Not only that, but one perpendicular to the wall I was facing had metal, for lack of a better word, bars on the outside. No doubt for better protection if anyone decided to break in. And, speaking of breaking in, I legitimately awoke to, I kid you not, the sound of that glass being pounded on extremely forcefully over and over again. In fact, it was so forceful that my bed was literally shaking. And you know what the downright creepiest part of this story was so far? Somehow, I was not remotely frightened. If that enough doesn't sound implausible, I first learned about home invasions in early 2022 thanks to Jacksepticeye, when he was playing a video game called Fears to Fathom, and I was so freaked out that day I was a little bit on edge. But after I think a few days, I was no longer scared. In fact, I also wasn't scared when my abusive older brother, who I hate more than anyone else in the world, would wander out of the house at night to sleep outside. I can only presume that that's because, again, he's an alcoholic, and then would leave either the front or the back door open, and because everyone else would be fast asleep, we would never find out until morning. And to rub salt into the wound, we didn't and still don't live out in the middle of nowhere or anything, but rather the populous urban areas of San Antonio, Texas. Believe me, if that happened today, I would be so mortified and paranoid of a stranger getting in. But to my knowledge, at least, no home invasions ever did happen in that house when we lived there. However, thankfully, someone did eventually bring me to my senses and make me want to live in as secure of a house as possible. And it was Mr. Ballin, my favorite YouTuber for scary stories, when I first saw his home invasion videos in December 2023, and specifically during the last week of school before the winter break. Now, home invasions are one of my absolute biggest fears, and I repeatedly check the locks on both the front and back doors of our current house multiple times in the hours leading up to when I sleep. And every time my mother looks out the windows at night, I'm always anticipating her to jump back and scream at a stranger spying in on us, or about to break in. But anyway, back to the story. Not only was I not remotely scared of the powerful, constant banging on the glass in literally the next room, but in fact, I clearly remember feeling annoyed that I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was instead intently staring at that wall out of, again, annoyance, waiting for the noise and shaking to stop. And then it was like a light switch had flipped, and instantly the silence of the night was deafening. That is, until a few seconds had passed and I heard a police car's siren whizzing past the house. This may sound trivial, but remember the voice at the end of my dream literally said, "The police keep catching those damn furries breaking into people's homes?" Additionally, something I would like to bring up is that this could not have been me just still dreaming, because I explicitly remember staring intently towards the direction of the noise, and when the police went by, I was still staring there, and there had been no transitions in my vision aside from, of course, my eyes gradually acclimating to me awakening. And I know that describing all of this took a while, but it probably only lasted 10 seconds at most from when I awoke to when I heard the police car. Then, after I heard the siren, I was snapped out of my feeling of annoyance and suddenly came to my senses. And I freaked out so hard that I had dreamed of a break-in, followed by mention of the police, and then woke up to slamming on the glass, followed by the sound of a police car. And not only that, but I had a petrifying thought. What if the break-in had been successful? I didn't know what I should do because I legitimately did not know if what I had experienced was real or not. But the evidence seemed to suggest that it was. So I stammered out something to my brother, who was in the same bed, about me having a nightmare that suggested I should check the house. I probably sounded crazy, if he could even understand what I was saying, but I didn't care. I then went through every room, except our grandparents' room because we never went in there, turned the lights on, and looked at every nook and cranny, waking up my mother in the process. Because of how the place was structured, the last room to check was the back room. The very same one where I heard that noise. But there was no one. And no sign of damage on the glass, despite the fact I literally just heard it being repeatedly and forcefully pounded on. And, even weirder, I then noticed the metal bars protecting the glass from the outside. This observation brought up 3 questions. 1. Who could possibly want to repeatedly slam their body against those? 2. How could they hit the glass so strongly with those in the way? And 3. How would I have heard the glass being hit so clearly, but not hear the metal? And, well, obviously I found no strangers in our house that night. Thank goodness. But all the same, I just couldn't help but be extremely weirded out and legitimately curious at how on earth I could have experienced what I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, I just had, even when it seemed completely impossible. And the most annoying thing ever was that my phone was literally right next to me on a printer the entire time. But because I was so annoyed when the event was actually happening, I didn't even think to film it. But something important to note is that during late 2023, remember that this happened in March 2024, I started watching videos about scary true stories. Everything from Sasquatch sightings to pervert encounters to glitches in the Matrix. And as I was lying down in bed at 1-something in the morning, I know because I checked my phone after searching the house, and trying in vain to fall asleep again, I realized that what I experienced was probably the latter, because there was no way the banging could have happened with the metal protecting the unbroken glass. But also, I can't see how I could have dreamed hearing and feeling the slamming against the glass and shaking of the bed, all while my eyes remained opened and I noticed no big difference aside from the sudden silence. And so I theorized that I awoke in a universe where the metal was not protecting the glass and someone was breaking in. But then I eventually transferred into a universe where there was metal protecting the glass and no break-in had been attempted. But as weird as that was, again, there was that dream. And this wasn't the first time a dream of mine had become a nightmare predicting the future. The first one was in 2019, and I'd like to describe it, but the story is already long as it is. But the fact that it had predicted 2 things that would happen right afterwards is bizarre, and proved to me that even though I'd already been 100% convinced of the existence of the paranormal, now I knew for certain of the existence of the paranormal. And I haven't even gotten to the most horrifying part of this entire ordeal. My brother was sleeping in literally the same bed as me. And when I asked him if he heard anything, and my entire immediate family has realized that he has the best hearing out of all of us by a landslide, or if he had felt the bed shaking, he said that he hadn't. That was really scary. I still don't know what to make of this, other than that it was most likely a glitch in the Matrix, but even though I can remember it so well after almost a year, I'm still scratching my head as to how and why this could have happened. Oh, and despite the horrible home-invading fursuiter my brain invented, I still love the fandom, and even more so now than ever before. I still don't want to experience anything creepy about it, though, and I really hope that that nightmare, and its accompanying glitch, wasn't a premonition of anything that will happen to me in the future. A couple of years ago, 2 friends visited me. We'd been eating and drinking coffee and had a nice evening. Later, I was going to drive them home, and my one friend was checking that she didn't forget anything. When she was in the hallway putting on her shoes, she had the phone there. When we sat in the car, she was sending an SMS to a friend. I saw the light from the phone. After a few kilometers, she reached for the phone to check it, to see if she got any replies from the friend, but she couldn't find her phone anywhere. We stop at a gas station and look because me and her boyfriend were convinced it fell under the seat. We looked everywhere, but no phone. Then, her boyfriend, who doesn't believe in anything like glitches, says, "You probably forgot it at my place." So, we went back, and the phone was lying on the living room table. I saw her holding her phone walking to my car, and I saw the light from the screen when she sat in the car. I can't explain this. How did the phone disappear from a car kilometers away back to my house? I've never told people about this because they just think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw and there is no explanation. So, I wake up at my girlfriend's apartment, a little foggy from the night before. I was totally fine for about 20 minutes, when abruptly, I had to throw up. I use her restroom, and what came out, I can only describe as not so watery spit, with what looked to be remnants of leaves. Dumbfounded, I flushed the toilet, cleaned myself up a little bit, walked out to tell her I'm feeling better. I do not, however, tell her about the leaves out of embarrassment and plain confusion. So, anyway, I had plans to go and help my brother who's moving. I get to his house and start working. Hours go by, and I get a text from my girlfriend. She just woke up from a nap, and she said she wasn't feeling too well and that she had to throw up. She then mentioned that there were leaves in it. My heart sank, and I lost it for a moment. I tell her about my experience that morning, and she proceeds to freak out. We never got food together or separately the entire night before. It doesn't make any sense. We catch up on the phone later that night, with these leaves being the main topic. We both agreed on all the details. Not watery, but with a bunch of crushed up bits of leaves, with the stems and all the veins they have. Needless to say, we were pretty stultified. I'd had a few beers that night, and she had a vodka drink or two, and the only logical answer, I think, is that clearly we both must have eaten a bunch of leaves and just don't remember. But that's not likely for obvious reasons, and she's somehow convinced that it's paranormal. I don't think we'll ever close this case, but it's left us thoroughly stumped. The goosebumps have been very strong with this one. So that, my friends, was this week's Glitch in the Matrix collection, a collection of strange and bizarre stories that really just make you think. And hopefully, as the title states, assuming I title this video the way I intend to, helps cure your case of the Mondays. Yeah. Been a very interesting week this past week, as I mentioned in my live stream on Saturday. If you weren't there, I will mention it here as well. This is not me looking for sympathy or fishing for sympathetic comments. This is me just letting you know what's happening. On Tuesday last week, I went to the urgent care and subsequently the ER because they sent me. They did a full CT scan on my midsection because I was having abdominal pain, and apparently I have gallstones. My gallbladder has been failing to do its job. It has not been filing the TPS reports with the new cover, and as such, I had to get HR involved, and soon, after my follow-up call with the person that my primary care has sent me the information for, I will be terminating my gallbladder's employment. Now, this is a common thing that a lot of people go through. I understand that. I understand it's fairly simple. It's quick. You're typically outpatient the same day. You go home, maybe take it easy for a little while, and then get back to life. Albeit with fewer saturated fats. But to me, it is still a very scary situation. Still very anxious about the whole thing. I've never had any major medical procedures done. Like, I've had a tooth removed, and that's about the most surgery I've had. I had like an echo on my heart. I had, a heart monitor to check because I was having the palpitations, which was all solved. That was all figured out. Nothing invasive. This is, as simple as it is, an invasive procedure, and I am not looking forward to it. However, I will keep all of you lovely people up to date. And when that time comes, if I need some time off, I will inform you guys of that as well. Now, let's move on back to the stuff. Anyways, this was Weird Stories, Glitch in the Matrix stories. Hopefully, you all enjoyed them. If you did, please do hit that like button. That helps the video do better. If you're new to the channel and enjoyed what you heard and like glitch stories, well, I do them weekly. Consider subscribing. That also helps. I do other stories as well, so there's plenty to enjoy. If you have a story to send in, go to astheravendreams.com. There's a big button on the front page to send it my way. And it works in every browser that is not Microsoft Edge. If you want to listen elsewhere, you can listen on Spotify, Pandora, Audible, pretty much anywhere you get your podcast fix. As the Raven Dreams is what you want to search. You can also join Patreon and memberships to get early access to content like this if you want to. Never expected, always appreciated. And you can also buy posters at the coffee link, that's ko-fi, down in the description below. And yeah. All that said, we're going to move on to the final thing you can do, which is comment with what we call the word of the week. Now, on the screen right now, and probably a few seconds before now, is a collection of all the comments that were left on last week's video with the word of the week. All these people went above and beyond, and left a comment with the word of the week, and as promised, I screenshotted those comments and put them at the end of this week's video. Sorry, that was 2 weeks ago, not last week. Last week was a compilation, so 2 weeks ago. Normally it's just 1 week, so. Now, if I missed any of you, I do apologize. Please do shout at me, in the comments to let me know I missed you, and I will apologize profusely. I do my best not to miss them, but it's kind of rough screenshotting your comment section on Google Chrome, because sometimes it doesn't load all the comments, sometimes it moves whenever you screenshot. It does weird stuff. I don't even know. But yeah. Thank you to each and every single one of you who left a comment 2 weeks ago. And yeah, without you guys, the video probably wouldn't do as well, so thank you again. If you didn't leave a comment, that's totally fine too. This week, the word of the week is staple. S-T-A-P-L-E. Staple has a few definitions. I'm going to list 3 of them, and you guys can pretty much use it however you want. I won't restrict you. You can use any definition you choose, not just the ones listed, and use it in any way you see fit. Staple means used, needed, or enjoyed by used or enjoyed by constantly. I mistyped that. Used, needed, or enjoyed constantly by many individuals, produced regularly or in large quantities, or usually metal fastener, used to hold things together. Such as a staple for Thanksgiving is turkey and cranberry sauce. Those are staples for Thanksgiving. Yeah. Use it, get featured next week. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful week, and I hope I see you again here very soon. See you on Wednesday. Till then, hope you have a beautiful day. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. Hope I see you again, but until... I already said all that. Why am I saying it a second time? Anyways, until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, my friends, until next time, much love, and sleep well.